So I'm doing my video on the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. I'm going to start off with a quote that President Franklin D. Roosevelt said after his bank holiday. So he said, "After all, there's an element in the readjustment of our financial system, more important than currency, more important than gold, and that is the confidence of the people," which he was basically saying that if people were confident in the banking system, then the banking system will remain stable. So the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation was created in order to calm the citizens' panic because of how drastically the economy changed after the stock market crash. So in that time, a lot of people were withdrawing money because of how much they were losing, and which only created the banking system to become worse, and the government knew they had to immediately extinguish that panic before it got out of hand. But there was still $1.3 million lost, and about 9,000 banks had to close in like 4 years. So that withdrawal of money from that large wave of people at a time was called bank runs, and that made banks more susceptible to failure. So at the beginning of the Great Depression, about 1/3 of all banks in the United States were closed because of these bank runs. So the FDIC was a federal plan that protected bank depositors, but at first it was turned down by Congress because to them it seemed too expensive, and they were afraid of supporting banks that did not do their job very well. So even though they did turn it down, they did eventually sway to the public opinion. So on June 16, 1933, President Franklin D. Roosevelt signed the Banking Act of 1933, which then in turn created the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. So two men who helped develop this bill were Senator Carter Glass of Virginia and Representative Henry Stegall of Alabama. So even in the first in the first few months that the act was established, it did work effectively in keeping the confidence of the citizens high. And then on January 1st, 1934, there was an insurance implemented, which was only implemented after examining all the banks that were not part of the Federal Reserve System. And this insurance provided depositors with $2,500 in coverage, but which after a couple of years it did become more. I think it was about $5,000, maybe more now. But then in 1934, only 9 banks failed compared to the 9,000 in the previous 4 years. So even now, the FDIC is still around and has helped with many drastic economic changes throughout the years. And less banks have closed and never have gone into the double digits ever again after the Great Depression.